Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Yiboneh, Yiboneh, Yiboneh HaMikdash, Yitzion, Yitzion, Yitzion Temaneh. Neshama shir chadash.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. Welcome back to the Yiboneh Beit Midrash. A very warm welcome home to Torah. We are in Parashat Pinchas. We're not exactly in the beginning. We're in the first verse, but we're further on inside the Yakar. As you know, we use the Yakar to arrange our discussion, to use as the outline for our discussion. And we do encourage people to learn Torah. And the way you can do that, at least during this year, is look down below in the YouTube description box, and you'll find a link. And B'ezrat Hashem, you'll be able to follow along with the material. Also, there are previous classes. There are links to previous classes as well in the description box. So, if you like this shiur and you like other shiurs, you can go and check them out. So basically, in the first verse, which is number 1 on the source sheet, Numbers 25, verse 11. In English, it says, Pinchas, the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, the Kohen, has turned my anger away from the children of Israel by his zealously avenging me among them, so that I did not destroy the children of Israel because of my zeal. Now in the Hebrew, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron, a Kohen, very nice. He was Hey Shivas Chamasi. He returned. God is speaking, right? God is speaking and saying that he returned. He turned away my wrath from upon Me'al B'nai Israel. Now this is what we're going to be discussing. These words: Bekano et kanoti bitocham. Specifically, those words. Usually in the Hebrew text, when you see a double language, you could easily translate it as very much. Somehow that word is exaggerated. In this case, the very fact that those two words are used basically right next to each other is a sign that needs to be evaluated. And what we're going to discuss is specifically there were two vengeances, there were two revenges that were avenged. Okay, so even though in English it says, by his zealously avenging me among them, also the word bitocham is used. The Yakar will explain why that is an interesting word. Now, that's basically, and let's just finish the Hebrew. V'lo kiliti et b'nei Israel. I didn't finish them off, I didn't destroy them. Bikonoti, in my anger, in my zeal. So what we want to discuss is, believe me, a lot, okay? So we're going to go systematically one thing at a time. I think it's important to see the Rashi on that verse. Rashi mentions right away that the tribes were mizalzeloto. They were doing bizayon to him. So they were disparaging him, and they were making fun of him, or trying to put him down by saying, well, have you seen the son of Puti? We're going to have to discuss what does it mean. Who is Puti? Or for those sake, Putiel. Putiel, for all practical purposes of Pshat, we seem to think that that is referring to Jethro, because Jethro had how many names? 8 names that we know of, and one of them was Putiel. So have you seen the son of Puti, whose mother's father, and we now know it's Jethro, fattened calves. So to fatten calves is Pitam. Here it says Pitam. So he was fattening calves for idol worship. So if you think about what Yisro did, he was a Baal Teshuvah. He was a convert. According to some, to others, he was a righteous Gentile who never converted. We're not here to resolve that issue, and maybe it'll never be resolved, but there are two thoughts that Yisro never converted, possibly. He went back to Midian to convert others, or to at least spread the message of Bnei Noach to his family. According to others, he actually did convert, and he went back to convert others to Judaism. But nevertheless, let's go with the idea that he was righteous nevertheless after he did tshuva. Whether he was a komer, He was a high priest. He was Cohen Midian. But we're not getting into that right now. All we know is what Rashi says is that they made fun of him because of his pedigree, because of where his mother's father, so his grandfather on his mother's side. Now we already know from the Torah itself that on the father's side, Aaron or Cohen. Aaron, then Elazar, and then Pinchas. So the father's side is clear. What we don't have is the mother's side. And the Yakar explained, Rashi says it's for this very reason that the scripture goes out of its way to show you that he comes from Aaron, that you have no right to make fun of him. But then it also says, by his zealously avenging me. So we see that means by his avenging my vengeance, God is saying, by his releasing the wrath that I would have released, meaning he stopped my wrath. So the word kina always denotes something motivated to take vengeance for some matter. And that's what we're going to discuss. What was the vengeance? Or for that matter, what was the double vengeance? What was he taking a vengeance for in a double way, in a two-faced manner, Okay? So the Yakar, let's go back to the Yakar right away. He says, Bikano et kinati betocham. Those are the words that we're dealing with. Yehuda, right? It's 4 words on the top of the Hebrew sheet. Zealously avenged my vengeance among them. The Yakar says, Kinasi bahem lo ne'emar. Notice what the Torah does not say. The Torah does not say that I zealously avenged my vengeance, bohem, in them. That would be in them. But it says inside of them. What in the world would inside of them come to add? And we'll see. So the Yakar right away tells us, Limaid al kol kiddush Hashem tzarich liyot b'toch b'nei Yisrael davcha. When you do a kiddush Hashem, it must be in front of 10 other people. So the idea is this, that what we think in the vernacular, we say if someone does a nice deed, someone was nice to somebody, oh, what a kiddush Hashem. That's just the vernacular. Like when people say, do a mitzvah, do a good deed. Okay, you can use the word mitzvah not in its correct form. When you say, oh, he was just nice to somebody, so he did such a good deed, it was such a mitzvah. That's not what a mitzvah really means, although I wouldn't discount that it could be a mitzvah. Same too with Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem is when you're put on the line, life or death, and you choose death. Now, what I mean is, like in the Nazis, like when they said, hey, Jew, dance in front of all these other Jews, or they wanted to cut your pants off in front of all these other Jews. So normally a Jew, when he does Kiddush Hashem, is even in private only on these 3 great cardinal sins. If somebody put a gun to your head and said, you must commit adultery, you must commit murder, or you must commit idolatry, even in private, you're obligated to give your life and not transgress. But when you're in public and there's shmad, the non-Jews are trying to wipe us out and make fun of Judaism, so then even in front of 10 people, when even it's a small matter, one should be willing to give up their life. Now, I would recommend you to speak to your local Orthodox rabbi. Don't just give up your life. Make sure you really know what you're talking about. But how do we know it's in front of 10 people? In Leviticus chapter 22, verse 32, as it says over there, you shall not desecrate my holy name. Lo tichalalu et shem kodshi. Don't desecrate my holy name. V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. But rather you shall sanctify me b'toch. See, b'toch b'nei Yisrael. I'm not sure we're going to go into the whole idea here. It's a beautiful, if anybody wants to read the beautiful Rashi on this verse, go ahead. I think it would take too much time. It is important, but not necessarily important to this lesson. Okay, so let's go back into the Yakar. And he says, now we know why when Pinchas took vengeance, in verse 7 it says, V'yakam mitoch ha'eda. See the word mitoch? When he stood up to kill Zimri, it was mitoch ha'eda. It was within, in the midst of all the Shimonites. He was from the tribe of Shimon, and therefore he put his own life at risk. when he stood up to skewer shish kebab, Zimri and Cosby, which we'll talk about also what they were doing. But in the meantime, what does the Yakar say? It says, "V'hu di'alanu shivcha shel Pinchas." This is actually telling us the praise of Pinchas. Shahaya moiser nafsho al kiddush Hashem. He was actually willing to give his life over for the sake of sanctifying God's name. V'afal pi shahaya betoch ha'eda. Even though he was amongst the Shimonites, he was within the Eda. Makom misukan mipnei kroivei Zimri, because it's a place that is actually very dangerous. He was surrounded by Shimonites, and he was killing the prince of Shimon, named Zimri. Mikol makom sam nafsho bekapo. Nevertheless, what he did was he placed his own life into his hands, meaning he was willing to have his life sacrificed. The outside haremez, now just as a hint to the idea, it says lokach romach biyado. The verse actually says, so in Numbers 25:7, it literally says, the Pinchas son of Elazar, son of Aaron the Kohen, saw this. He saw what they were doing, and I'll describe that in a second. He arose from the congregation. V'yaka mitoch ha'eda. He rose from amidst, within the congregation, v'yikach romach biyado, and he took his sword, his spear in his hand. Now, interestingly enough, what is a spear? In Hebrew, it's a romach. Romach is the exact gematria of 248. Okay, what is that? 248. We hear that number a lot in Judaism. 248 are the amount of positive mitzvahs. It's true, but they parallel to our limbs. We have 248 bones. Okay, so basically you're talking about he's giving over his life. He's giving over all his limbs, as it says in Hebrew, Kimasa zesh sam kol ramach evorov bekapo. It's as if he gave his whole life over. Just a few side points. When we say the Shema, the mitzvah of saying the Shema, one should have yira, awe, and trepidation. They should think of themselves at the end of a rifle, the end of a cannon, that as if their life is depending on it. It's a real sacrifice, as if you are a real sacrifice. This is how one should say the Shema. Well, that's the attitude one should have when they say the Shema. What was happening here? So, without getting in too many details, because I'm sure many people are listening to other classes, simply put, Zimri, who was the prince of Shimon, wanted to cohabitate with a non-Jewish woman in public. It wasn't just that he wanted to, this was a rebellion. Okay, this was part of his rebellion. And by doing so, by the way, according to our Kabbalah, according to our Jewish tradition, according to our sacred tradition, that if somebody would do this so brazenly in public, that a zealot has the right to bring it to an end, let's just say. Okay? We're trying to be a little bit politically correct here. We don't want to get banned on YouTube, but basically the zealot has the right to bring this to a something conclusion? What do you say? Foregone conclusion. There you go. A foregone conclusion. Okay, so that's what happened. And we're going to see the 6 miracles that happened when Pinchas did this. The next paragraph is actually, I'm going to say, the biggest focus. We're going to focus a lot on this. Now, after I finish this paragraph, I want to continue and then go back into all the details. I think that's how we're going to try to do it. There were actually 2 types of zealousness, 2 types of vengeances that were going on. And there's not only 2 ways, there's 2 aspects to them, or 2 ways to look at these 2 vengeances. Achas al avodah zara. Perhaps one was on the very fact. Do you know that these Moabites and these Midianites, Bilam had a whole plan to curse us, and if that didn't work, he brought us to sin. And Balak sent his own daughter, who is, by the way, Cosby, to entice the Jews. And not only entice the Jews, entice Zimri, which we'll see, because He made her say, he caused her, you're going to entice the Jews, I want you to go for the best. I want you to, you're the princess, you're the daughter of the king. I want you to find the highest ranking guy over there and bring him down. Because if you couldn't curse the Jews, the next best thing is to cause them to sin. Now, I'm just giving that away to our enemies, right? Guys, push this, don't use this against us. If you can, right, the Jews are blessed. And when are we most blessed? When we're doing the right thing. When we're following the Torah, following the commandments, following what God says. And if you try to curse us, it ain't going to work. But what might work? Unfortunately, if we are estranged from our Father in heaven. So they tried to cause us to do avodah zarah with the Baal Peor, which, by the way, is in our mind, is a very disgusting way of serving a god, and that's through defecation on the idol. Let's put that aside. The other idea of vengeance was on the znus. As I said, they tried to entice us. They had these idols in their shops. We came by because we were thirsty, we were hungry. We came by to ask for some drinks, and they had their what would you call that? The shops, right? They had their little stalls, and so they had curtains. They had back rooms to these stalls. And so they tried to seduce us to get us to come into their tents and buy their wares, and told us how cheap and how good quality these things were. And once we got inside, then they had even more beautiful women who tried to seduce us with sex. And then they told us that the only way that you're going to have sex with me is if you worship this idol. And the way you worship the idol was probably the most disgusting way you can worship an idol, the Baal Peor, and that is through defecation. And that there's a whole psychology behind this. You know, it's so interesting. Man-made religions. They created God in their image. I mean, this is like the epitome of a low self-esteem of yourself. You created a God in your image, and the way you worship it is by defecating on it. This has to be like the lowest of the lows for anybody. But there's a lot of other philosophical and psychological issues here, which unfortunately, and I'm not going to say which party in America fits closest to this type of idol worship. But you can imagine there are political parties that resemble this idea. Okay, so that's one idea of the double kinah. But there's another idea, and that was Likvod Hashem Yisbrach, because he was avenging the honor of God, and on the same level, meaning there's two sides of it, also Likvod Moshe, for the sake of the honor of Moshe. He was getting back at them for this. So what are the ideas here? Kikol hamachalel Hashem. Anyone, just think about it. If you disregard, and not only disregard, disgrace, here we'll even go further, mechalel, desecrate God, eino choyle kvod l'rabo. You would never, ever give or apportion any honor to your Rebbe. Your Rebbe's the one here talking about and teaching you about Hashem. So if you don't have any honor for Hashem, you're certainly not going to have any honor for your Rebbe. And as a kal v'chomer, meaning as a logical extension, a reasonable argument, shim ein shchina chashuva kenegdo. If you're not considering the glory of the divine presence, if you're not considering the importance of the divine presence, therefore, i.e., a relationship with God, rabo lo kol shekein, then you certainly wouldn't be interested in developing a relationship or giving any honor or consideration to your rabbi. V'chein oz panim kenegdo. Therefore, they had such brazenness, such chutzpah, that the truth is, I think this was Zimri that said it, in Gemara Sanhedrin 82a, Bat Yitro mi hitirlach. Now, they were talking to Moshe, right? That they're accusing Moshe of being with a woman that he shouldn't be with. Now, this is before Matan Torah. It's true that she converted, but the idea here is, one second, ready for this? Moshe himself served as a Kohen during the inauguration of the tabernacle. So as a Kohen, you're not allowed to marry a Giuris, a convert. So it's true that Tzipporah was a righteous woman. She was probably a ben about Noach for a long time. She converted, doesn't matter. A Kohen is not allowed to marry a Giuris. Could be. But they're looking at it like this, from simple pshat. Her father, Yisro, was an idol worshiper. So what? So what? He converted or his daughter converted, it shouldn't be a problem. So what does it really mean? Bat Yitro, the daughter of Yisro, who allowed you to marry her? So basically, think about this. They're arguing with Moshe. What about Pinchas? Pinchas's mother was Bas Putiel. Okay? She was the daughter of Putiel. The question is, who is Putiel? Is Putiel Yisro? Or is it Yosef? I bet you never heard that one before. Well, Rashi brings it down. There's another idea that you're not allowed to give instructions of halacha in front of your rabbi to someone who asked. You're in the audience or you're standing there next to your rabbi. Someone comes over, asks the rabbi a question, and what do? You answer the question. What a chutzpah. The person asked the rabbi, and you're not supposed to paskin halacha. But what happened over here, unbelievable. When this incident was taking place with Zimri and Cosby, we'll see there's different opinions. What actually took place? Did Pinchas approach him and remind him of the halacha? Did he act on his own without speaking to him about it? Let's find out. But in the meantime, the Kliyakar brings down this idea that Pinchas paskin the halacha in front of his rabbi Moshe. The Amarlo, what did he say to himself? According to the opinion that he paskined, he said, my Rebbe's not saying a word. He can't paskin because he himself is nogei b'davar, meaning he's biased in the matter, meaning that that Moshe himself married a daughter of Yisro. So if they're coming and making fun of Pinchas, right? They're making fun of Moshe, but here at the same time, they're also going to turn around to Pinchas and say, you're in the same boat as Moshe. But Moshe himself was nogei b'davar. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't paskin the halacha because he was biased, because he himself was married to a daughter of Yisro, Tzipporah. Therefore we see, L'chein amar, you know what it actually says in verse 12? Look in 12 on the source sheet. Not number 12 on the source sheet. Chapter 25, verse 12. Where do we see it? It's number 13 on the source sheet. It says, therefore say, I hereby give my. Now my edition, M-Y, is capitalized. M-Y. M-Y. I hereby give my covenant of peace. Now you got to understand, according to the Kliyakar, and he didn't make it up, this is God telling Moses, you say, in front of everybody, as if you're saying, I, Moshe, give my, with a small M-Y, covenant of peace to Pinchas. Do you realize what's going on here? That after Pinchas paskined in front of Moshe, the death penalty is actually quite suitable as a punishment. And yet, Moshe didn't hold any grudges. In fact, he understood the situation. He was nogei b'davar, and God was letting Moshe know that this is a gesture you should make towards Pinchas. And that's why the Kliyakar says, it doesn't say l'chein emar lo. It doesn't say l'chein emar lo, God saying, therefore you should say to him, but rather you should say to all of Am Yisrael, I make a covenant of peace with him. As if Moses is saying it himself. Listen to the words. L'chak nemar l'chein amor hini noisein lo es brisi shalom. That's the verse. Hayalo lomar, what it could have said, l'chein amar lo, that you should say to him, but it doesn't. Ela biyuro, rather the answer is HaKadosh Baruch Hu omer l'Moshe, that God said to Moses, what? L'chein amar l'kol Yisrael. I, God, want you, Moshe, to let everyone know. al atzmecha, as it's coming from you. Hineni noisein lo esprisi shalom. I, Moses, am giving Pinchas my covenant of peace. Kedei shelo yomru Yisrael. So the Jews would not say, Shein ata b'shalom in Pinchas al shahora halacha b'fanecha. Right? There's such kapeda, there's allowance for such either anger or strictness coming from Moses' point of view, and yet he didn't, and God wanted him to let all of Am Yisrael know that he is forgiving and overlooking this tragic sin of Pinchas. L'chein todia l'Rabbi, therefore God wants you, Moshe, to let everyone know. Mitzidcha, from yourself. Hineni noisein lo, behold, I am giving him, as the word hineni is going on Moshe himself. Now the next few lines I want to get through, and I want to go back deep into this idea about the two types of vengeance. Ukeneged zeh, ukeneged ma shekinu lelokav. We said earlier that he was taking vengeance lekvod Hashem Yisbrach, for the sake of God. If you look clearly in verse 13, which you'll find in number 15 on the source sheet, it's Numbers 25:13. It shall be for him and his descendants after him as an eternal covenant of kahuna, because he was zealous for his God and atoned for the children of Israel. So this verse is very different than verse 12, which we just read. This idea here is v'hoyesolo luzaro acharav bris kahuna soilam tachas asher kine lelokav. And the Yakar says, "V'tamo zel eno koi amash amar." This is not at all going on the previous verse of 12. Hine no sein lo, l'fisha zescharo al shekine lemoshe, because the previous one was. Remember, we said there's two keynote. One was for the covenant of Hashem, which the reward is in verse 13, and the verse 12 is referring to the reward he gets for taking up the defense of Moshe. And now this last little piece is going to blow you away, because I never thought about it like this, and it's very difficult for a Jew to think about it like this, but this is what it says. It says, then he atoned for the children of Israel. This is the last few words of verse 13, where it says, right, that he was v'chaper al b'nei Israel. It was atoning for the children of Israel. So Pinchas was not a Kohen when he did this, when he skewered them. The interesting thing is like this. The promise was to Aaron and his sons and anyone who would be born after that point. So Pinchas was already born. So he was not grandfathered in, so to speak. If that's a good, you like that expression? He wasn't grandfathered in. So, but he did something, he did an act which brought him. But the Yakar is going to tell us he actually atoned through the killing of Zimri and Cosby. It says, "Ki hevi es harasha hazel kapara Israel." Is it even possible that such an evil person? What do you mean? That by killing them, these evil people, you brought an atonement? I want you to hear this. Yeah. So there's one idea. It's very important for those Christians out there who are listening. There's such a concept in Judaism, and I bet you never heard this, that if a tzaddik dies, he can mitigate, he can reduce judgment on the Jewish people. Okay, some call it vicarious atonement. There's no such thing in Judaism. What it means is that when somebody dies, a righteous person dies, number one, there's a lot of ways to think about it. Just the crying at the eulogy can bring somebody to tshuva. So the death of the tzaddik brought about atonement. It wasn't some magical pill. It was the very fact that I'm standing there in the audience listening to the eulogy, and I'm crying and I'm thinking to myself, wow, I really need to do tshuva because of this is a great person. I wish I could be like that person, and therefore I need to make changes in my life, and therefore his death brought about my tshuva. That's a very simple pshat. However, on a more Kabbalistic level, it's only a Jew who's not perfect can atone. Okay, why is that? See, if a Jew was perfect, which the Christians claim their Jew is perfect, right? That's what they claim. So there's no tuma that will attach to that Jew. So in other words, the imperfect Jew, but he's righteous, but he's not completely righteous. When he dies, he can be attached the sin of the living Jew. The Jews who are alive, their sin is attached to him. But that's only because he's open to darkness, because he's not perfect. The one who's completely perfect, there's nothing that attach himself. There's nothing that can even possibly attach themselves to this person. So the whole idea that Christianity makes this such what the word I'm looking for, absurd claim that a perfect Jew can actually atone for other Jews is just not even on the table. Okay, so that's a very Kabbalistic idea. But in the meantime, this is what the Klippa are saying, that it's this Russia that's bringing kapara on all of Israel. And it's nechshevet, v'nechshav lo karbana shahakravat parim ukvasim. And it was actually as if this Kohen, he's not even a Kohen, but Pinchas made the offering. Remember, he's not a Kohen, he's making this offering, it's having an effect. Therefore, Hashem swears, Ata Kohen le'olam, you are going to be a Kohen forever. Kasher hachalta b'shimush kahuna. It was actually like the inauguration rites. In other words, when the other Kohanim, they went through a whole 7-day process, and they were anointed with blood on their different limbs, and they went to the mikveh, and there was oil. There was all kinds of the whole prescription involved, but the prescription for Pinchas was just the act, the shimush kahuna. He started with an act. It's what they say about a duck. He looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck. He's a duck. Well, guess what? Pinchas did everything like a Kohen. Therefore, bang, he's a Kohen. Okay, now, Sota 43b. Actually, it starts on 43b, yeah. So it's very interesting because it says over there that regarding the Aaron, it wasn't just Pinchas, but it was the Holy Ark that also went with them into war, and it's quite a lively discussion. I want to skip a little bit of that, but basically the idea here is that Pinchas was pointed out that he specifically is going. The question is what title. He had the title at this point when he went into war against Midian as the Mishuach Milchama. There's a special Kohen, like in Braveheart, who goes out there and he pumps everybody up and tells them God is with you, and if we don't win, they're going to rape our children, right? They're going to steal our land, and we're going to be poor. No, seriously. He goes out there and he says God is with you, and God promised he's going to be with you, and he wants to make sure that, remember, we're talking about a Milchamas Reshus at this point. Any Milchamas mitzvah, when people are coming to attack you, there are no exceptions. There are no exemptions. But here, in this discussion here, is a Milchamas Reshus, when we're going out to war for resources. So the Kohen is going to say, the special Kohen, anointed Kohen, is going to let people know that if you're just got married and you're not a full year yet, or you have a vineyard that you haven't yet eaten from, or a house that you haven't yet inaugurated, you haven't lived in it, and a few other things. And the main idea is that if you're afraid of sin, you might have sinned, you're going to die in war. So he says, everyone I just talked about can walk out. So it's not to embarrass the people in the last category, right? Everyone walks out together. So you're not putting yourself in the spotlight. So that's very important to know. So basically, we're asking, if Pinchas was the Kohen that was specially assigned for this, so what makes you think he was going to take vengeance? So he was there for vengeance, as the verse says. The question, though, is, who is he? And we said the verse in Exodus chapter 25, that Elazar ben Aaron lo chach lo min benos Putiel lo liisha. So it's in Exodus chapter 6, verse 25. Who is Elazar? Elazar took for himself one of the daughters of Putiel as a wife, and the verse continues to say he gave birth to Pinchas. He begot Pinchas. So the Gemara says, of course, who's Putiel? Putiel must be Yisro. Yisro, Jethro, he's the one who fattened up the calves for idol worship. And so the Gemara actually says, no, he's from Yosef, it's a similar word, because when we talked about fattening up calves for idol worship, it's shepitem agalim lavodah zara. Here, when we talk about Yosef, he was shepitpet biyitzro, meaning he fought, he overcame. He was actually mezazel his yetzer. He made his evil inclination as if it was nothing. Okay, he didn't consider it at all. He belittled his evil inclination, which is very interesting. So then, which is the truth? Is Pinchas from Yisro, or is he from Yosef? On the back page of the English sheets, I hope I have it here for you. I made a little diagram. That's the short end of the stick here, where it says, basically the Gemara says, well, we're not talking about his direct mother and father, but we're talking about the father or the mother of his mother. Okay, so from the father's side, if you look on the last sheet, you got it? Looks like this. So on the father's side, there's no change. We obviously know who the father is. Okay. But what about his mother? The mother of Pinchas. So the Gemara says it could be the grandmother, the mother's mother, could have been from the family of Yosef, whereas the father could have been from Jethro, or was Jethro, or vice versa. We're still talking about the grandmother on the mother's side. She could have been from Jethro, and the father came from the family of Yosef. Okay? So with all that in mind, what I want to take you on is a short journey, because who in the world, how can we ever get mixed up? I mean, Rashi actually says both, that he's from the seed, Pinchas is from the seed of Jethro, who fattened calves, and he's also from the seed of Yosef, who was Pitpate, the Yitzro, so Putiel. So in the short of everything, Puti, the word Puti is also plural. Putiel. El referring to either God, so he was fattening up calves for avodah zarah, or Putiel. El is another name for man. God, meaning man has a godly essence, meaning what are we? We're creating the image of God. What is that image? Free will. God is the ultimate in free will, and we're just like an image, a small little, how would you say it? You got the, you have the macro and you got the micro. So the macro is God in free will. We're like a micro. We're like a small example of, right? We're the only animals on the planet Earth that have free will. So the word Putiel. So he made fun of his Yetzer Hara, meaning he mezazel his Yetzer Hara. He overcame his Yetzer Hara. So that fits in well. But I have something to tell you, boys and girls. The Zohar says that Potiphar is Yisro. You guys should be falling off your seats. How is Potiphar Yisro? And the Zohar says it. So I figured out a little bit of some ideas. First of all, we have an idea that Potiphar, he's the one who bought Yosef. Okay. How can he be Yisro? Well, Yisro was a big to-do guy. I mean, he had a lot of protexia in Egypt. In fact, he was even Pharaoh's advisor. He was a very important person. We already said that Yisro himself did tshuva. Well, I'll tell you how degenerate Potiphar was. Potiphar's wife, she came on to Yosef. Why did she come on to Yosef? Apparently because her husband wasn't interested in women. Okay? So in terms of his wife, she was starved for sex. Okay, so that was that side. If he was a kumar, he was a priest. He was a priest of avodah zarah, and that was before he did tshuva. So it says that Potiphar was a Kohen on. He was the Kohen on. It means the priest of a particular idol. Whereas later, after he did tshuva, he's Yisro, and he's Kohen Midian. And he also had to flee, right? When he was the advisor to Pharaoh, he advised them, he didn't want the Jews to be thrown into the river. So his protest was to run away. And that's where Moshe met up with him, and that's where he met Zipporah after she converted, after she became a righteous Ben Noach, or Bat Noach in this case. So in a very strange sense, now let's talk about Dinah's daughter, Osnat. There's an opinion that Osnat was Yisro's daughter, or let's say Potiphar's daughter, right? Potiphar's daughter. That's who Yosef ended up marrying, right? Yisro's daughter, before he was Yisro. After he did tshuva. So how did that happen? Yaakov is aware that his daughter Dinah was raped. A Jewish man has a daughter who was raped, right, by the scum in Shechem, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to give up for adoption. I mean, right? You need a healthy family. Hello? You give him to Potiphar? It must be the Potiphar already is Yisro. He's already a righteous person. There's no way Yaakov is giving over his granddaughter to some unknown evil person. He's already done tshuva. Do you follow what I'm saying? That Potiphar was the Kumar, was the priest of idol worship. And then he did tshuva. He's now Yisro. Same person, Potiphar, but he's under a new leaf on life. According to the Zohar, Potiphar is Yisro. How did Yaakov come to give over his own granddaughter to a evil? He didn't give it to an evil person. He gave it to someone he could trust. He gave it over to Yisro in the guise of Potiphar. And so Yosef ends up marrying Osnat. This is the daughter of Dinah, who was the result of the rape. So we already saw how Potiphar is called the Kohen On, but what about Yisro is called Kohen Midian? So if you go to Exodus chapter 2, verse 16, right, where he's called Kohen Midian, and he has 7 daughters. Okay, so the Balatorium says over there that there's a couple different ways to understand Kohen Midian. Ushnei pa'amim gave peso micha. So interestingly enough, on the other side of the sheet is Shoftim, Judges chapter 18, verse 30. But before we get to that, there are certain discussions about, we have the northern tribes. And Dan, besides the idea of Yerovim setting up the golden calf for them in Ephraim, Dan also sets up a whole place of idol worship and a golden calf as well. And they're looking for somebody to be the priest. So they get a hold of a guy who's a Levi. Wow, they got a priest. And they're going to make him the Kohen Gadol of this. Guess who this guy was? Moshe Rabbeinu's grandson. Yeah. Do you know that Yisro and Moshe made a pact? So, interestingly enough, we already said he's about tshuva and everything. So, this is how I understand it. Moshe's impressed with this about tshuva. Wow, you came to it on your own. That's very impressive. But in Judaism, we all seem to put people into boxes. You have to go to school, you have to be indoctrinated, and you have to go through the system. Okay? The system can have pluses and minuses. Well, apparently Yisro had an idea. He was wondering, what's the best system? Your system, Moshe, of putting everyone in a box and making a system, or allowing people to, like me, come to it on my own. So he says, okay, so your first son, I'll let you marry my daughter, but on condition that your first 2 sons, you do like this. The first son, according to this, that you actually have to let him be a priest to idol worship. That's the words. However, the way I understand it is more like you have to let him find out on his own. Okay? I think mine is a better. This is not on my own idea. I read it somewhere. But anyway, I'll read the words here. Yitro Kohen v'kumar lavodazara. So Yisro was an obvious priest to idol worship. and that's the Mechilta. Kishenasa Moshe's Bito, when Moses married his daughter, Hutzrak Moshe Lidur Lo, that Moses was forced to make a vow. Sheben Rishon Shiyoled Lo Shahaya Kumer Levodazar. Right? I couldn't make this up. According to this opinion in the Mechilta, that Moses swore that the first son would be going to be a priest for Avodah Zehaya Kavanato Ki Yoda Sheyachzer et Chamav Lemutav. The truth is, Moses was so sure of himself that Judaism is true and correct, that the kid will find his own way, just like Yisro found his own way. Yisro found the truth, the kid will find the truth. They got nothing to worry about. Sha'asa Sharei Nit Gayer, right? Yisro converted, my son will come back to the true faith. Nevertheless, not because the commentaries explain that Moshe's grandson Yonatan, the son of Gershom, became this Kumar in the time of the judges. Okay, so what happens is that Moses' grandson Yonatan becomes the priest, leaves the faith, becomes the priest, because he made the condition, because he made this oath, not because he allowed him on his own to find the truth. That's okay, apparently. It was the condition he made that his own grandson, Yonatan, became a high priest. Now turn the page over to this side, and it says, see where I put a little arrow on the right, but on the left. Okay, it says the children, it's verse 30, chapter 18, verse 30. The children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Yonatan, son of Gershom, son of Menashe. See, it says son of Menashe. It doesn't say son of Moshe. He and his children were priests for the tribe of the Danite up until the day he was exiled. The land was exiled. Look in the Hebrew. V'yakimu lehem. Did you learn this in yeshiva? You're looking at the Hebrew? V'yakumu lehem b'nei Dan. Right, they set up in the children of Dan as a pesel. V'hayonatan ben Gershom. Ben, what's the next word? Menashe. You see the nun is hanging in the air? It says in small print, nun tluya. The nun is hanging as if the nun isn't there. What's the word Menashe without the nun? Moshe. Hu vanav kohanim l'shevet. And remember, he's a Levi. He's a Levi. Son of Gershom, son of Moshe. Look down below in the you see on the right side, it says 1830. In the Masoretic text, the nun of Menashe is suspended above the line. This implies that the remaining letters are to be read as an independent word, meaning Moshe. The Talmud therefore identifies that Yonatan of our verse is the son of Gershom, son of Moshe, but out of respect for Moshe, the letter nun was added to mask his name. So what do we see here? We see a lot. That, first of all, just that Moshe was perhaps correct in allowing his children to find the truth. I think you still have to give. We have a mitzvah of chinuch. We have every obligation to try to direct our children in the right direction. There's no question about it. We have to make borders for them. But I think we have to get our children to think deeply about life. Ask the questions. What's the meaning of life? Get them to ask the question, right? But to make a condition, it seems like that's why he was punished. He actually made a condition with Yisro, allowing to make it that way. So that is how we learn that. I think this is very important in terms of chinuch. God forbid I should go against. I'm also about tshuva, so I don't want to go against the system. But I do know and have realized, and many people have complaints about the system. We're not going to push it under the rug. And Baruch Hashem, the very fact people talk about it and try to come up with solutions, right, for the future generations. And I think that it's happening within Judaism for sure, that people are more open-minded. You're stronger in your faith. When you're stronger in your faith, you have nothing to fear, right? Questions don't bother you. We're coming out of a long exile. We came out of the European exile when we were coming into America. And we were very weak in America in terms of Yiddishkeit. And I think people were just afraid that people were going to lose whatever little bit they had. So they caused a lot of, boxes, restrictions, what you're allowed to think about. But you know what? There's been a Baal Tshuva revolution. People are asking all the questions, and I think that people are more open and more strong in their faith. Anyway, so I want to just finish off on wishing everyone a mamish, a Shabbat Shalom, Besor Tovos. We need to hear some good news. We're looking forward to the complete redemption. First, let's start with Shabbos and have a great life. And B'ezrat Hashem will have the ingathering of the exiles with the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash. B'Hev Yameinu. Amen.